The rifle felt heavier in Clara's hands than it ever had before. Maybe it was the cold seeping into her bones. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe 3 months of solitude had worn her down more than she cared to admit. The pounding came again, hard enough to shake the cabin walls. Clara lifted the barrel toward the door. Outside, the Colorado wind shrieked like something dying, hurling snow against the house as though it meant to rip it from its foundation. This wasn't an ordinary storm. It was the kind people spoke about years later, the kind that swallowed homes whole and erased every trace of the living. At 24, Clara Whitmore had already endured more than most lifetimes allowed. She de-buried her parents after cholera took them when she was 16. She de-survived being traded by her own kin to a man 3 times her age, passed over like property in exchange for security. She'd endured 3 long years as Thomas Whitmore's wife, treated less like a woman and more like an obligation. But as the wind howled and the cabin trembled, she wasn't certain she would survive this night. The fire had sunk to faint embers, shadows stretching thin across the pine walls. In the small room off the kitchen, 12-year-old Jake Hartley coughed in restless sleep. He wasn't her son by blood. He was the orphaned child of one of Thomas's ranch hands, crushed beneath a fallen fence post the previous spring. Clara had taken him in without hesitation, though she barely had enough to feed herself. Some decisions weren't decisions at all. The knock came a 3rd time. Her gaze flicked to the cellar door. Beneath it, hidden in an old flour sack, lay $500 in cash, Thomas's money. She had discovered it a week after burying him behind the church in Silver Creek. She never learned where it came from. Part of her didn't want to. "Who is it?" she called, forcing steel into her voice. A pause. Then a deep, steady reply cutting through the storm like distant thunder. "Silas Maddox, I'm not looking for trouble, ma'am, just shelter." She kept the rifle raised. "There's a town 5 miles east. They've got a hotel. 5 miles might as well be 50 in this weather," he answered. No anger, just exhaustion. "My horse won't make it." "I'll pay to use your barn." Every hard lesson she'd learned screamed at her to refuse. A woman alone didn't invite strangers in. That was how tragedies began. Jake's cough echoed again, wet and sharp. If she sent this man back into the storm to die, that burden would never leave her. "Step back from the door," she ordered. "I'm armed." "Yes, ma'am." She heard his boots scrape against the porch. Clara inhaled once, twice, and unlatched the door. The wind struck her first, stealing her breath. Then she saw him. He was enormous, well over 6 feet, shoulders broad enough to eclipse the storm behind him. Snow clung to his coat and hat. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw. But his eyes, gray and steady beneath the brim, held her attention. Calm, careful, behind him a horse stood trembling, steam rising from its flanks. "You're smaller than I expected," he said quietly. "The way you spoke, I figured you'd be 6 feet tall with a beard." Despite herself, her mouth twitched. "I'm tall enough to pull the trigger." "I don't doubt it." He raised his hands, huge, scarred, empty. "The barn's out back," she said after a long moment. "Hay in the loft." "You leave in the morning." Something softened in his expression. "Thank you, I'm in your debt." "It's Mrs. Whitmore," she replied. "And you can repay it by leaving." He nodded and led his horse into the storm. Clara didn't sleep that night. She kept the rifle across her lap, listening to every creak of the cabin. But the stranger did not return. By dawn, the world lay buried beneath drifts waist-high. She needed to check the animals. The path to the barn was short but brutal. Snow dragged at her legs. Halfway there, her boots snagged on something hidden beneath the drift. She fell hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. Cold flooded her quickly. Her limbs grew heavy. The snow no longer burned. It felt warm. That frightened her most. Then strong arms lifted her. A voice cut through the fog of her thoughts. Heat surrounded her, real, solid warmth. She was being carried. The last thing she felt before darkness claimed her was the steady rise and fall of a chest broad as a wall. When she woke, firelight flickered nearby. Pain shot through her feet as feeling returned. "Easy," a low voice murmured. Her eyes flew open. She shoved weakly against him. "Don't touch me." He stepped back immediately, hands raised. "You were freezing. I won't touch you now." She took in the barn, the stove, her boots drying nearby. He stood a few steps away, almost uncertain. "The animals?" she asked. "Fed and watered." That startled her. "Why? You gave me shelter." The barn door swung open. Jake stood there, wide-eyed. "Ma." "I'm fine," Clara assured him. Jake studied the towering man. Are you a bad man? Silas crouched to the boy's level. Used to be, he said honestly. Trying not to be, Jake nodded. Ma says everyone deserves a chance. Silas glanced at Clara. Something softened in her expression. She extended her hand. Help me up. His grip was careful, gentle despite its strength. Breakfast in an hour, she said. You can join us. Hope flickered in his eyes. Silas was meant to leave the next morning. He didn't. 3 days passed. The snow melted slowly. Each morning Clara woke to the sound of work, hammering, wood splitting, a deep voice humming low. Broken fences were mended, the leaking roof repaired, the stubborn barn door fixed. Silas never asked. He simply worked, as though restoring her world was reason enough. Jake shadowed him everywhere, learning to split wood with balance instead of force, to calm a horse with patience instead of noise. Silas never raised his voice, never towered. He knelt. It unsettled Clara. Monsters weren't supposed to be gentle. On the 4th day, Maggie O'Brien rode out from Silver Creek with supplies Clara desperately needed. Maggie took one look at Silas on the roof and smiled knowingly. He's useful, Maggie remarked. He's a stranger, Clara replied. Aren't we all at first? That night, Silas spoke quietly by the fire. I'm not a good man, she waited. I've done things. Things that would make you send me away. Then why stay? Because I'm tired of running. She studied the scars, the exhaustion in his eyes. Stay until the road's clear, she said. If you still want to tell me, I'll listen. The next morning, a black carriage rolled up the road. Harlan Crane stepped down, dressed too clean for the plains. 2 armed men flanked him. He spoke of debts, $500, interest, papers. Silas stood at the fence, muscles tight. This land will settle the debt, Crane said smoothly. Water rights included. It's not for sale, Clara answered. Everything is. Silas stepped forward. The lady said no. Crane measured him, then retreated, promising to return. Inside, Clara's hands trembled. He won't stop, she whispered. I'll help you, Silas said. That night, Clara found a letter hidden with Thomas's money, proof of gun running with Crane. Proof of danger. She kept it to herself. The following morning, another knock came, lighter this time. A bounty hunter stood at the gate, holding up a poster. Looking for Silas Maddox, he said. $200. Clara's world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Silas stepped forward beside her before she could speak. It's true, he said quietly, and then he told her everything. About the mining company that hired men like him to frighten settlers off their land. About the violence that followed. About the night he was ordered to burn down a homestead, knowing there were children inside. About the moment he refused. About the gunshot that came first from the other side. About the man who died. About how that death clung to him like a shadow he could never outrun. He did not excuse himself. He did not beg. He simply told the truth. Clara listened without interrupting. When he finished, silence settled between them. Then she did the one thing Silas had never prepared himself for. She believed him. Everyone deserves a chance, she said softly. Including you. The bounty hunter studied them both before tucking the poster away. 48 hours, he said. After that, I collect. That night, Clara faced a choice. She could protect what little peace she had found, or she could fight for it. She chose to fight. She went to Crane alone. He had expected fear. He had not expected defiance. Words turned sharp. Doors locked. What followed was not a storm of snow, but of splintering wood and gunfire. Silas found her note too late. He didn't knock when he reached Crane's house. He came through the roof. Sheriff Burke and 2 deputies burst in through the back. Chaos erupted, shouts, smoke, breaking glass. Men who had long believed themselves untouchable suddenly found themselves cornered. Crane fell. Victor Crane fell harder. In the middle of the wreckage, Clara broke free and ran straight into Silas's arms. Alive. By morning, the bounty was withdrawn. Charges were reconsidered. Witnesses stepped forward about the mining company's tactics. Silas Maddox was no longer a hunted man. But freedom carried its own question. Who would he choose to be now that he could stop running? At dawn, Silas stood outside the cabin, hands resting on the fence he had rebuilt. The plains stretched wide and quiet before him. Home was no longer a place. It was a promise. And promises were worth staying for. The morning after Crane was taken away, the land felt different. Too still. The kind of stillness that comes before something decides whether to heal or to break. Clara stepped onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Silas. Their fingers brushed. Neither moved away. Jake tore across the yard chasing a chicken, laughing so hard he stumbled over his own boots. Silas watched him, something tight and protective settling in his chest. A life like that deserved guarding. Sheriff Burke rode out near noon. "Crane's headed to Denver tomorrow," he said. "He won't be back." "And Victor?" Espero asked. "Alive," Burke replied, angry. "But alive," Silas nodded. That was enough. When the sheriff left, Clara turned to him. "You can go now," she said quietly. "No one's hunting you." Silas looked at her, truly looked. At the woman who had faced armed men without flinching. At the widow who had trusted a stranger in a blizzard. At the person who had seen his worst and stayed anyway. "I know," he said. "I don't want to." The truth settled gently between them. That evening they sat by the fire. No secrets remained. "I was married before I ever knew what love was meant to feel like," Clara said softly. "I thought cold was normal. I thought silence meant safety." Silas listened. "I don't want that again," she continued. "I don't want fear disguised as comfort." "You won't have it," he answered. "Not with me." And she believed him. When she reached for his hand later, he followed her with care, strong enough to protect, gentle enough to never harm. What he gave her was not dominance but patience, not force but tenderness. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be chosen instead of claimed. Dawn came softly after that. Weeks passed. Silas stayed. He repaired fence posts, helped Jake with reading, and walked into town without glancing over his shoulder. The weight he had carried for years grew lighter with every ordinary day. But one evening, Clara noticed him turning something in his fingers at the table. A simple gold ring. "What's wrong?" she asked. He stood, nerves clear in the set of his shoulders. "I don't know how to do anything halfway," he said. "I don't know how to stay without meaning it." Then he knelt. "I've been a weapon," he said. "A hired fist, a man people feared. But with you, with Jake, I found something I didn't know I was allowed to want." Her hands trembled. "I can't promise perfection, but I can promise these hands will build, not destroy. They'll protect, they'll love you every day I draw breath." He looked up at her. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me?" Tears blurred her sight. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes," Jake burst in as if he had been waiting outside the whole time. "Does this mean he's my pa now?" Silas laughed, deep and unguarded, and pulled the boy into his arms. "If you'll have me." The wedding was small, but the church was full. Maggie cried loudly. Sheriff Burke stood stiff and proud. Even Jeb Rowlands appeared clean-shaven, tipping his hat in respect. When Clara walked down the aisle, Silas felt every dark chapter of his past loosen its grip. All he could see was the future walking toward him. They built their life the hard way, with work, with honesty, with storms that came and went but never drove them apart. Years later, Silas stood on the porch of a larger house, coffee cooling in his hand. Children's laughter spilled through the open door. Clara slipped her arm around his waist, resting her cheek against his back. "Storm's coming," she murmured. He smiled. "Let it come." This time they were ready.